Welcome to which is quickest, Leith Hill in real life or Leith Hill on Zwift. Science.
Here's the weigh-in ahead of the virtual ascent on Zwift up Leith Hill. Well, welcome to the beginning of the Leith Hill segment on Zwift that I'm going to use today, which is going to replicate the segment we used outdoors, i.e. the Leith Hill GF segment. Now that's 700 meters further in terms of distance than the official 100 greatest climb segment on Strava, which is also the official KOM on Zwift. Now I only found the 100 greatest climb segment on Strava after we completed the climb on Sunday, hence we're using the GF segment. But fear not, because it's exactly replicated here on Zwift. Well, the recce indicates it's pretty accurate. And that extra 700 meters includes a bit of climbing, including a nice little steep kicker just before we go into the left-hand turn onto Leith Hill itself. So it should be a very nice comparison indeed. Now, you can see when we go to the shop that I've specified the Trek Edmonda, and it's got the lightweight wheels. There they are. So replicating the Villiers outdoors. Then if we go to settings, you can see trainer difficulty 100%. And in the weights, there we are, 64 kilograms in Zwift settings. So all has been equalised. Anyway, time to crack on, here we go. So just go around this left-hand turn and we start the segment proper. A little downhill, just as there is in real life. And then I'll try and replicate the kind of 280 to 300 watts that I put down on the segment outside.
Once again, I'm extremely grateful to Paul Hambler for the amazing on-bike camera work. The data you can see on the screen is my own, and as you can see, the exit speed on the little descent towards the start of the KOM was 39 kilometers an hour. Now the Leith Hill GF segment starts right here, and you get a pretty flat run in towards the first ramp where you can settle into an equilibrium in terms of the power, cadence and heart rate. And I averaged about 35 to 37 kilometers an hour in the run into the first ramp, and that drifted down to about 25 to 28 kilometers an hour as the gradient edged up to 5%. The first ramp looks and feels steeper than the virtual one, and it tops out at 12% gradient, and I kept my speed in the 18 to 23 kmh range. And in terms of effort, power and out of the saddle action, it represents, shall we say, a nice little aperitif ahead of the main course. The left-hand turn, replete with wet autumn leaves, is sharp and requires delicate negotiation. So it's briefly off the gas to edge around at a stately 15 to 18 kilometers an hour, but at the same time welcoming some micro recovery before bringing up the watts to lower zone 4. It's really important to hold back on the flatter sections of Leith Hill, as you're going to see. All in, it takes 1 minute 35 seconds to hit the left-hand turn, where the Strava segment for the official 100 climbs Leith Hill commences. And it starts with a shallower 2 to 5% gradient section, where, as I noted, it's important to pamper yourself a little and avoid over-investing, because as you're going to see, the hill they call Leith rewards those who save early on in order to unleash fury later. At upper zone 4, my speed averages 20 to 30 kilometers an hour, varying with the gradient. And here, we hit the start of the Kingston Wheelers hill climb segment, which I took part in September this year. And I have 2 minutes 50 seconds on the dashboard, but the level of concern is now rising rapidly. And rising it should be, because I know, having invested too early, too soon during the Kingston Wheelers hill climb event itself, and without having had a warm-up because I got there too late, and having wobbled across the finish line, I was then rewarded with hill climber's cough for 2 days after. With Paul's sage advice of letting the hill come to me still ringing in my ears, a 6% gradient introduces us to the second ramp, which averages 8 to 10%. Always happy to obey orders, I stay seated and spin, desperate to conserve precious energy, and averaging 18 to 20 kilometers an hour in the process. My level of concern now at a peak, as is always the case before the real hard work commences. I do not apologise for letting the watts bleed off a little bit here on the 3 to 5% shallow. Ride the hill and enjoy a moment of respite, and now burn another match to get the momentum up ahead of the double-digit inclines on the third ramp. See how the speed bleeds down into the mid to high teens when the gradient hits 11 to 12%, notwithstanding many watts are expended.
Yeah, nice. Keep springing that weight side to side.
Time now for a tad more pampering, and to take in the iconic red brick architecture out of my peripheral vision. Only one thing matters now, and that's getting the job done well and not having to go again.
Yeah, good transition.
I got out the saddle and the power down early here, and was pleased as punch with a compliment on my transition. The gradient on this section pushes well into the mid to high 20s, so I was mashing the pedals for all I was worth, fixating on the next false flat, with the KMH in the low teens and a trough of just 5. We hit the end of the red brick section 5 minutes 58 seconds into the effort, and I'm once again out the saddle and doubling down in order to maintain momentum. I'm completely in the moment and it feels great to be alive, letting both Paul and the hill guide me as to when to mash and when to micro recover.
Good. And again.
Leith's final surprise is a luxurious but deceptively long right-hand bend, averaging 8 to 11% gradient. And I think, time to style this home, out the saddle with a flourish of power, Contador style.
There you go, Steve, take it off. 20 seconds, push.
But alas, muscle glycogen and ions in the lactic acid have other ideas, requiring a few little seated periods of respite and R&R. And this makes it all look a tad, well, agricultural as I manhandle the bike in these final moments. But I average 14 to 17 kilometers an hour before the gradient slackens off for the final 150 meters. My power fluctuates between 300 to 400 watts, and I cover the final section in 2 minutes 5 seconds for a total time of 7 minutes 48 seconds.
Yeah, good. All gears.
And the Leith Hill GF segment ends right here, just next to the little car park.
I gotta say, Leith Hill in real life, full gas, is a lot harder than Box Hill in real life, full gas. You'll see the gradient a lot more variable, much more up and out the saddle. I was in the small ring for this one or certainly from the start, the left-hand turn. And the lactic acid is quite exquisite from all the up and out of the saddle, max effort, burn all the matches, anaerobic action. Paul, you can't see Paul as ever behind the camera, cruising and offering encouragement, respect. Paul, thank you for that, mate.
Pleasure, pleasure.
We'll regroup. I just need to put myself together, back together. Could definitely feel the impact of the 1 hour FTP yesterday. Now this is my kind of hill. Homemade cakes and jams, mid-climb. How good is that? Zwift, get your developers on the case. I think we all need a little bit of cake and jam mid-climb. What do you say, Paul?
Yeah, fair,
Yeah.
fair point.
Yeah. So Paul, this is the first climb of the Cannondale under your ownership. I know you borrowed it for Streetly, but tell us how it feels to have, well, this machine of wonder in comparison, I guess, to the cross bike.
Just a lot lighter, especially at the saddle. You feel a lack of weight, I guess you could say, that you're working against.
Well, what is the weight of this one?
5.5.
And what do you reckon Neil Cross was?
I think 7.8.
7.8, right, yeah. So yeah, an adequate saving, some may say. But one thing you don't have on this one yet, but maybe it's to come. Look at the back here. We don't know, where's the...
Your favourite?
There's no 42. Where's the 42, Paul? Go, Paul.
Now I'm only capable of hanging with Paul for a short period of time when he opens up the afterburner. So see here the watts that I personally had to deploy to get up to speed and then hang with Paul for just 90 seconds. Yes, my friends, that boy can climb.
So in the name of science, we're both going to give it the beans on the virtual climb. Now I'm going to try and replicate the kind of watts that I put down today, but Paul, what are you going to do? Are you going to go full gas to try and replicate?
I'll try and replicate as best as possible, yeah.
Oh, replicate as well. Okay, there you go. So proper science, and then we'll take an average of the difference, right? And we'll be able to say categorically, is Leith Hill on Zwift quicker or slower than Leith Hill here in real life? And look at that, van life, that's what you call luxury. M&S Ice Spice bun, sat down. And the results are in. Me, 7 minutes 48 seconds, 20.8 kilometers an hour, 325 watts for that segment. Paul?
7:05 and 22.9 kph.
And this man did it without a power meter. Well, he had a power meter, but it was in his pocket because he hasn't got the fitting on the front of the bike yet. Insane. Basically, sir, that is a top 10 Strava time for the segment. First time out on the bike proper as well. Nice one. Anyway, see you soon, Paul.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you as ever.
Yeah,
and looking
pleasure.
forward to getting your virtual time and completing the science for this particular experiment.
Absolutely.
Cheers. Trying to get the cadence into a nice place. Not going to talk much now.
The exit speed on a minor descent towards the start of the unofficial Zwift segment is 44 kilometers an hour. However, the average on the run-in to the first ramp is 35 to 38 kilometers an hour, only a tad higher than in real life. Now, the first ramp itself briefly caps out at only 8% gradient versus 12% in real life, and my velocity on Zwift never drops below 30 kilometers an hour, and that includes the left-hand turn. I blast through the left-hand turn with 1 minute 27 seconds on the clock, representing an 8-second saving versus outdoors, and sweep across the start of the official Zwift KOM, which replicates the Strava 100 greatest climb segment. Oh, and by the way, the tear on the top of my jersey is from when I crashed the Villiers back in May. Jane patched it together. Waste not, want not, I say. I sustained 35 kilometers an hour with slightly higher power all the way to where the Kingston Wheelers hill climb event would theoretically start, and have just 2 minutes 20 on the clock, representing a 30-second gain on my 4D attempt. Looking here at the replay and contrasting with the power overlay for the real world climb, I can see now the big difference between Leith Hill on Zwift and Leith Hill in real life. That being the gradient on Zwift, almost all the way to the end of the red brick buildings and red brick walls, is much more consistent on Zwift in a 6 to 10% range. And that in turn facilitates much more consistent cadence, power and speed, keeping it in the 17 to 22 kilometers an hour range, probably with a little bit extra power, but nonetheless, it is a fair bit easier on Zwift. Towards the very end of the red brick section, which virtually goes on for a little bit longer than in real life, Zwift does provide a brief flirtation with gradients of 11 to 12% and a resultant low point in velocity of 15 km/h. And we end the red brick section 5 minutes 9 seconds into the effort, a fulsome 51 seconds faster than outdoors. You'll remember that by this point outdoors we've encountered 4 steeper, sharper ramps welded to 4 little false flat oases of respite, and in turn those ramps disrupt the equilibrium and bring down the momentum and the average speed to 16 to 20 kilometers an hour. And indeed on a third of the ramps, which is super steep and not really even in the same parish as Zwift because it caps out at 30%, the low point in speed is just 5 km/h, albeit low teens for most of it. In digital format, the sweeping right-hand turn is less impressive, albeit gradient looks pretty similar. But having 51 seconds less physical exertion in the legs and lungs by this stage makes a big difference indoors to the power deployed. Plus, it feels easier to push against a stationary bike, allowing the watts to stay in a 350 to 400 range, in turn enabling me to cover this section in just 1 minute 56 seconds. Basically, indoors is a bit more akin to a workout, which I guess I'm better suited to. The time under the arch, 5 minutes 16 seconds, is the official Zwift KOM time, which, as I say, replicates the 100 greatest climb segment. The total time for my Zwift version of the Leith Hill GF segment was 6 minutes 48 seconds, 60 seconds faster than outdoors.
Hey, little goodie, 100%. Wait, 64. Yeah, that was hard. And you can see, definitely replicating that much spikier power profile as per outdoors. But definitely it was easier because I think the bike is a bit more stable. You're not having to worry about dangers to kind of stay out the saddle and just mash. I think definitely in that final sort of 300-400 meters I was out the saddle more and the power was higher as a result. I definitely find it easier to sustain the higher power out the saddle, but it does bring the heart rate up a lot. Oh. Anyway, I'll report back in a second. We'll see what the time was. So the data has been assessed. Starting with the segment, Leith Hill GF. It's 2.8 kilometers long and you climb 151 meters, and that compares to real life 2.7 kilometers long, but you climb 159 meters. Very, very close. It looks good, feels good, and definitely the data confirms all is well. Turning to the time. The Zwift Leith Hill GF segment I completed in 6 minutes 50 seconds, averaging 25.2 kmh. Average watts 346, normalised watts 352. So very, very good. And within that I got a very nice 5-minute power. It was definitely another good legs day, 358 watts. Just goes to show, having a hard day yesterday, i.e. the ramp test, sometimes just sets the nervous system up for a good legs day the next day, as did the 1 hour FTP ahead of the real life climb. Turning to the real life Leith Hill GF segment. As I said on the day, that was 7 minutes 48 seconds. Average watts 325, normalised 333. And it was definitely a good legs day outdoors as well. So the difference in speed is 4.4 kilometers an hour. That's not insubstantial. I'll come back to that in a second. And as we promised, just ahead of some cake and jam on Leith Hill, Paul Hambler also completed the Leith Hill GF segment on Zwift on his watt bike. Again, another nice little variable controlled to ensure the accuracy of the power. Now, in real life, his actual time was 7 minutes 20 seconds, still super fast, but not the 7:05 that we mentioned after the event. That was my error, my apologies. Average speed 22.1 kmh, super impressive, and average watts 390. And Paul is not a big lad. And he did a much better job at replicating the average power, and also where he invested and spiked and where he laid off on the Zwift segment, where his time was 6 minutes 29 seconds, averaging 385 watts. So there you have it, conclusive evidence that certainly for the Leith Hill GF segment, it's definitely quicker indoors, as we always suspected. But turning to the 100 greatest climb segment, because obviously we completed that on Sunday, and again Zwift replicates the 100 greatest climb segment on its machine. Are there any differences? Well, very, very minor again. The official 100 greatest climb segment is 2.03 kilometers, you climb 135 meters. In Zwift it's 1.95 kilometers, you climb 134 meters. So my time, well, this morning on Zwift, 5 minutes 15 seconds, 22.3 kmh. In real life, that was 6 minutes 21 seconds, average 19.2 kilometers an hour. So the delta was only 3.1 kmh compared to 4.4 kmh on the Leith Hill GF segment. And I think that's because the Leith Hill GF segment has more flat. And definitely I've always noticed I'm quite a lot quicker on the flat on Zwift than I am in real life. And I think that's because the Zwift algorithm is quite, or shall we say, generous to us all in terms of rolling road resistance, air resistance, that kind of thing. But also you have a pretty aero position on the bike. But overall, I think we've conclusively proven on both Box Hill and Leith Hill, it's quicker to do it on Zwift. And I think it's a little easier to do it as well on Zwift when you haven't got to steer, you haven't got to concern yourself about danger, cars, other cyclists, pedestrians, this kind of thing. And therefore more energy from the brain can be devoted just to the pure, enjoyable deployment of power. If you like the video, please do give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, be super appreciative if you would. And definitely looking to continue this series on some bigger climbs once I build up my Zone 3 endurance a bit.